Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here today. My name is Conor and I work in the labs team here in Tynes. So what is Tynes? Well, we are a no-code automation platform to help you guys automate your workflows and get value faster. So before talking about why we should be automating, well, what are the problems? Well, a report done this year by Isaka reported that almost a quarter of all IT professionals are experiencing some level of burnout. And to be honest, that's not a good number. What does burnout lead to? Leads to employee churn, it leads to employees not being too happy where they are. And if we can reduce that level, we can get less employee churn, people staying there, and people being more invested in your company. Now again, out of the 73%, about 61% of these are saying that is due to high workloads. So manual workloads, all these little jobs that take them away from what actually matters. We are also releasing today, I believe it is, Voice of the SOC, which will be our own internal report, focusing on these sort of issues as well. So if you want to learn more about that, keep your eye out for that coming out in the next day or so. So, again, we're talking here about reducing workloads. How does that work with Tynes? Well, here's one of our customers, and you can see 91% reduction in manual alerts and 10 hours saved every day. That's 10 hours less on these trivial, meaningless little jobs, not meaningless, but in the grand scheme of things, that they can now focus to what actually matters, and that's securing your enterprise. So, how do we automate? Well, there's a bit of a staircase when it comes to doing automation, and it all depends on how mature you are along that stage. The first stage is manual. This is where everyone begins. This is where you're doing all these tasks yourself. Again, you're going to need some help, and that's where you start scripting. So this is creating small little tools to do some of the smaller tasks for you, before you start bringing these tools together for your orchestration and automation, where you start taking the person out, letting these automations run, and you don't have to worry about what's going on. One final stage, AI, that everyone's now talking about, but again, we're going to come back to that later. So, looking at our manual stuff, what do we need to be automating? Well, here in Tynes, we have created something called our Security Operations Automation Capability Matrix. So these are a bunch of small little building blocks that you can figure out where you might need to automate more in. So you have, on the very far left, your alert handling. So if you're taking in your alerts from your different XDRs, your SIMs, from phishing response, taking in all these alerts from your various places so you can actually start dealing with them. Now, again, we're taking in all these alerts. That brings us to stage 2, which is our issue tracking. So actually finding a centralized location for all of your issues, correlating to find similar issues so you're not doing the same tasks multiple times, and other fields like this. Next step is our enrichment. So actually taking your IOCs, taking your different values, and actually looking them up in your different tools. This can be external tools like VirusTotal, Abuse IPDB, or internal tools. So you might be looking up assets in your asset registry and tying these back again to your issue tracking. So this is a whole matrix to help you identify where you might want to automate, and that will bring us to our next step of actually building in Tynes. So if we want to look at building one of our tools, this is what the Tynes platform looks like. We try to be as simple as possible so you can automate easily. This here looks at your analysis of your IP address or your field number 3003 on the ACM. And what this does is it'll take in an IP address from any of your different tools. You can enrich it using VirusTotal, enrich it via Shodan, and that'll return you with a response. We can have a look at different tools. Oh, that's of course never demo live because that's when everything breaks. Are we connected? Cannot be joined. Great. I guess we are moving off that demo. Just my luck. But again, this is going back to our first stage of that automation staircase, the scripting. Building your different tools for looking up IP addresses, looking up hashes, looking up your internal assets. The next stage is your automation and your orchestration. That's where you're getting all these different tools. You tie them all together to actually build your relevant automations. So again, we might take an endpoint alert and start tracking that in your central ticketing repository, be that Jira, ServiceNow, or even Times cases, and doing some enrichment. So again, your IP address, your hash lookups, and then going into user actions. So again, if this is related to a user device, you might want to send a user a message going, hey, look, we found an issue with your device. Your device is getting isolated, so they're not being hit by surprise. And finally, your response, again, your host isolation. You might want to add block an IP in your IP list. And these, again, are the first two stages of your staircase. The final stage we were talking about earlier is our artificial intelligence. Now, AI is such a growing field. I'm sure none of you have heard of it before because it's so niche and so new, and there's definitely not 1,000 news stories about AI out at the moment. But we tried to do something different. Welcome to Times Workbench. Now, unfortunately, I believe our demo has broken through the Wi-Fi. Never demo live. But what is Times Workbench? Times Workbench is an AI chat which allows you to interact with your different automations. So if we go back to our scripting side of things where we're building our various tools, Workbench can integrate with these different tools to give you the responses you need. So for example, here is one for looking at SOC compliance. What about an AI chat for looking up an IP address? Different things like that. That returns things back in a very human readable format, which you can then use the AI to advance other parts of your processes. Again, unfortunately, this was meant to be the larger part of the demo, which the Wi-Fi is not letting us do. So unfortunately, I think we will have to cut this a small bit short. Hotspot is a decent idea. We'll see if we can get going. I know. I will quickly unplug here to see if I can connect. Okay, we'll see if this is operational. Thank you.
No worries.
So, if we have a quick look at Workbench, what we can do is we can create our tools on our left side of our screen here, and we can chat to Workbench. So, what can you tell me about, we'll give a random IP address, 123.32.5.5. This is, again, reaching out to our tool. Once it loads, hopefully now our hotspot is strong enough.
It's only downloading it all 10 terabytes.
Pardon?
Just getting the guys got a hotspot worried about.
Yeah. Here we go. So we've reached out to our tool. We can see that this is a South Korea IP, and this seems to be mostly harmless. So very quick investigations through Workbench. Now, if we have a look at our cases, here we have an example of a suspicious alert on a host. So we got a file hash and we got an IP address. What we can do is we can load this into Workbench. And Workbench only works on the context you give it, that being the tools you use, or in this case, cases that we load in. So if we have a look here, can you summarize this case? ignore my spelling, please. We are working off only the context we provided, which again helps deal with any hallucinations that might be faced with. Now again, we're giving us some action items. One of them, what can you tell me about the hash, file hash? Yes, please.
Why are you saying please to a robot?
I was taught to be polite growing up, and I guess all habits die hard. So here we go. Empty file detection. Okay. Not too much told to us about this hash. Maybe another thing we want to do is we saw an IP address was involved in this alert. What network connections are open on this host? So again, if we have a look at the different tools we have available, one of them is executing a command on the host. Now I might not know too much about running commands on endpoints, but that's okay. Workbench can figure it out for me. So while this runs, I can actually as well check what is it passing in. Well, in this case, we have a host ID and we have our command netstat. Very simple command, but again, even if you're not too technical, you can figure out what's going on. And here we go. There's a open HTTP address. If I want more details, I can actually look at our output here, and I can see a lot of detail here. Workbench is able to summarize that for me in a way that I can read. Okay, it's giving me an IP address. Again, I could look up what that IP address is, or I could ask Workbench. But the final thing I might do is, well, I don't really like this too much. I'm going to isolate this host so I can do some more. So isolate this host. So with this, I've been taking my case from our issue tracking. We've passed this to our enrichment. So I will confirm that. Pass this to our enrichment to look up our hash. We have passed this to our user response through Workbench. And now we're finally doing our actual response, which is isolating a host and running commands on said host. And once this is isolated, I can now escalate this to a relevant team who can do a deep dive on this because as things move up in our tiers, and we can move from there.
I have a question.
Yep.
So you said it works with the tools that are there.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a potential use case. Can you also integrate into the MITRE framework?
So that's actually something we are looking at the moment. If we can build a automation for MITRE, that is possible. We just haven't built any tools for that yet. But again, nothing's stopping you from being able to build that tool yourself.
I could try with the API too.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the workbench would basically read out the information that it would get from there and could answer me, for example, attack chains or APT information with the workbench. The workbench works as an AI with the information it gets.
Yes, so it is all just depending on the context you provide to said AI. I'm just seeing why this is hanging.
Is it its own LLM, or do you use a commercial LLM?
Actually, I might move to our final page then, which is the questions. When it comes to the LLM, we run on AWS Bedrock. So this is internal to your tenant. No data leaves your tenant to ensure security. No training is being done. What you can do as well is we have a BYO AI. So you can bring your own AI model through your tenant settings. You configure that. So if you want to use a very specific AI model, we're not stopping you. But by default, we use AWS.
Right. Okay.
Are there any other questions?
So with your bring your own AI model, that would, for example, mean if I have Gemini for security,
Mhm.
I have the API exposed by Google, I could use it here and query back and display it as
Yep.
well like that.
Yeah, so you can use Gemini, and so again, if you set it up using your tenant, Workbench will use Gemini instead of AWS Lambda, yes, or AWS Bedrock.
And in a playbook scenario, let's say, could I also have blocks that, from Gemini that then would parse in a playbook fashion, not without a workbench?
You can pull AI actions into a story, yes, and again, when you set at a tenant level, that is your AI across everything. So if you set Gemini, your AI actions and both your LLM use Gemini. If you stick with AWS Bedrock, your LLM and Workbench are both Bedrock based.
So the Bedrock thing is already in there.
But
as a
yeah,
playbook
so that's
block as
built
well.
in with Bedrock. So again, if you just come along, you can just get started straight away.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Well, thank you everyone for coming and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.